Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to vectorize this hand lettering piece that I did, and I'm going to show you a couple of tips and tricks that I use for vectorizing when using the Bezier curves. They can be a little tricky, and so I hope that you can find some inspiration in how I work with them. First off, let me hide the dock, and going to adjust the image a little bit because I want to increase the contrast so I can see where I want to vectorize. I just duplicated the background layer and set this to multiply. I guess it's multiply in English. This kind of brings up the contrast so you can really see what's going on here. There's a couple of things in here that I don't like. I smudged the ink there, and there's a couple of white spots, but that doesn't bother me right now because I know what I want it to look like. So I'll save the image like that. So, okay. Usually I do a little bit of more of, I don't know, correction with curves and everything. But this image is pretty good, so I'll just increase the contrast and I'm fine. Usually you can do whatever you want if it helps you to better see what you did and to, think about how you want it to look like. I just call this processed, save it, and then we're gonna close Photoshop. And I can go into Illustrator where I can bring in this image. Gonna scale it down to, this is an A3 document, which is, oh god, I don't know the dimensions, but it's pretty big. I usually work in a workspace that's bigger than I actually want it to be. But if it's too big, it can get tricky with, the values here in the top. So I just put this in the layer 1, create 2 new layers, lock the background layer, actually double click, and you can dim the image, which will make it a little more milky, I guess. Then lock the layer and go into the layer above. I'm just going to switch these because I like to have my rulers and my guidelines on the green layer. So with Command and R, you can show and hide those guidelines, those rulers. And now you can click and drag to actually create guidelines, which you can use to align your artwork. Right now, in this case, I think I might leave those out because it is curved composition. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that right now. But in a couple of cases where you have straight lines, horizontal or vertical, you can use those to align everything perfectly and make sure like the X height is right and the caps height is right and the bottom line is right. It doesn't make a lot of sense right now because it's curved, but you might want to do that for straight compositions. So let me undo that, and I'll just go ahead and grab the pen tool. You can get the pen tool by pressing P on the keyboard, which is a standard keyboard shortcut, or you can use the palette, the tool palette here. Choose P, and what we're gonna do is to vectorize this O, just make an imaginary box around this letter, like this. Okay, I'll just draw it out so you can see what I'm talking about. And make it touch the letter on the sides. So the points where your box touches the letter, that's where your points are going to go with the Bezier points. So that would be here right at the top. I'll just click and then do another one, and then another one, and then another one, and close the whole thing. Well, I don't want to close it right now because it obviously it's not a closed O letter. So I'll imagine another box around here. Well, around here. So I'll make one at the bottom right here and there. So let me just do that. And then also one in here, because you need to contour this curve. And then on the inside as well. So you imagine a box that touches all the inside points of this O. Like that. Right here and here. And then also here at the corners, because corner points are a little special. So now we have the points aligned, but obviously it looks a little weird. So we need to adjust the Bezier handles. Right now it's just straight lines. We do that by holding down the Shift and C so we can get the anchor point conversion tool. And then you can click those anchor points and drag out. What's really important is that your handles stay straight like that. You can do that by holding down the Shift key while dragging. And I'm just gonna focus on the left side of the curve. Obviously the right side looks kind of weird right now, but the left side is fine. And what I'm looking to do is, while dragging, I want to do half of the way of the curve. So I don't want it to go all the way out on the outside, because then all the weight would be on this anchor point and none on this one. But instead I want to balance it to get an even curve. And I can do that by just dragging out halfway, like that. And then I'll take the next one and do the rest, like that. And that gives me a really nice and smooth curve, because the weight of the Bezier curve is equally on both points. As you can see, it did the trick of doing half of the way of the curve here. That doesn't always work, but most of the time you can get away with that. So I'm going to do this with this one again. So we have a problem now. We don't quite match the line that I did there. Now it's a matter of, do I like it or do I not like it? Right now it looks pretty good to me, so I'm gonna leave it. Otherwise, you could just, with this tool, grab the point here and drag it back so you can match the curve. It's kind of tricky. I would have to go back in this example and then bring this one out just like that so I can match it perfectly, but I think I'm gonna leave it like that. It looks pretty good to me. Moving on to the next point, same procedure. It goes like this, and as you can see, if I go back, this curve is not halfway, it's like almost all the way if I want to match this curve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this back a little, like that, and then go to the next, match it. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We have an corner point right here, and they can get a little tricky. I don't have a recipe on how to fix them. You'd kind of have to play around to get used how you want it to look and how you want it to feel. Right now I see that this handle is almost above this one, which is obviously not a good thing, because then, as I said, all of the weight of this curve is on this point and none on this. That's not what I want, so I'll just grab it, hold down the Shift key so I'll stay in the horizontal line, draw it back, go to this one, and just do a little bit. Now, it's kind of tricky. I just realized that this point is not really exactly where I want it to be. But there's a pretty easy way to fix that. You can just click and drag, and then we have the handles like this. But if you want to move the point, you can just hold down the space bar, and if you hold on the space bar, you can move the key, the anchor point around. So I'll just set it to about here, and then hold down the shift key again. So if you release the spacebar, the point will stay where it is. So holding down the the spacebar, I can move it around, put it in place, let go of the spacebar, and then I'll hold down the shift key. So I'll stay in alignment with a 90-degree angle. And probably I'm gonna do it like this. Next anchor point is also gonna be a little bit of experimenting, dragging out, looking, moving the point around with the space bar, dragging out the handles with the shift key pressed. And okay, so I'm pretty happy with how it looks here, but now we have a special case because all the curves were just one-sided. They weren't changing directions right now. This one is a little different because if I drag this out like this, I get an S curve like this. So it changes from left to right. That's fine, but if you go into further detail on how Bezier curves work, this is not the optimal case. What we're gonna do right now, and what gives you the best result, is take this, move it around, have a look at that. The curve looks pretty smooth and good, which is a little bit tricky sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't quite match. You have to experiment a little bit with that. But it looks pretty good to me right now. Let me just check. And the curve here looks pretty good. You see the anchor point is here, and right there is it bends. It looks a little weird, but we're gonna fix that. With this curve, I am pretty happy. So I'm gonna leave it like that, usually until the letter is finished, and then look for all the S curves. But to show you the concept of why of what to do, and because this is not good, I'm gonna do it right now. We have the plus key on the keyboard. That brings us the add anchor point tool. So if you hover over the path here, it shows path, and if you click, it just adds another anchor point. You can eyeball this, but you would want to add the anchor point right at the turning point, at the inflection point of this curve. So follow along. You can, like I said, you can eyeball this. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is just for rendering purposes, because the rendering engine of the Bezier curves, they are a little stupid, and they have to be. We as the designers have to be the ones directing the algorithms, and so it is pretty crucial to understand how those Bezier curves work. I have a couple of resources that I'll put in the show notes, where you can learn more about Bezier curves, some articles, some blog posts, really interesting stuff, but also it can get pretty boring if you're not into that kind of stuff. So I recommend checking it out, but you can also get away with not knowing how these things work and just using them. Moving on to the next point, pretty straightforward like all the others. Halfway of the curve, both directions, works pretty well. Next one here. And this is a little bit, it can, since the curve is pulled more on the outside here, so there's a little space here. This should probably work. Have a look. maybe a little bit too much. We'll fix that later. Right now I just have the outline in the view because it gives me a better view on how the letter on how matching I am with the outline of the letter. Okay, so what I did right now is I adjusted this curve again, and now this handle went away. This is kind of annoying because I want to adjust this curve right now, but we can easily fix that. Just hit the A key on your keyboard, which is the anchor, the direct selection tool, the anchor point selection tool, and just click the anchor. That brings out this point again. Shift and C, you can go to the conversion tool again, drag the handle back, and that's how we can fix this here. Okay, this is a really special case right here, and I am not sure on how I'm going to fix that. This just depends on how it looks on the letter. So maybe I'll go into refining that later. And then this point, I have a problem with this handle. It goes out too far, but we can just dial that back. Do a little bit of magic here. Dial this one back. And this probably looks terrible right now, but I'm gonna see that in a second. To show you how I refine my letters, I'm just going to hide my background, and as you can see, the letter has a couple of problems. There's a weight issue with the line. It's thinner here than it is here, and that looks weird. This anchor point here looks a little weird. This is probably a little too far off, a little far at the top, but let's just see. I'm going to go press V on the keyboard for the selection tool, select my letter, and now I hit Shift and X to invert those two, the stroke and the fill color. That makes it a bold black letter, which is good for, checking the outline a little different and checking for some weight issues like this one here. Okay, so we're gonna address this problem here first, and this one. Just select the letter with the selection tool, then press A on the keyboard for the direct selection tool. Click this anchor point, which is a little too far on the top. I'll just move this down with my arrow keys on the keyboard and have a look on how this feels. Because I will be changing the proportions of this the spacing here, I might need to adjust the handles a little bit. But it looks pretty good to me right now. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it like that. Now to this anchor point. This looks a little weird, and it breaks the rule that I told you about to keep all the handles straight. Because if you keep all the handles straight, vertical or horizontal, it creates nice and smooth curves. With this point, I have a little problem because it is a corner point, so I'm not really sure on what to do with it. But let me see if I drag it out like this and then move it over here. The corner looks too sharp. Okay. So probably this is an exception of the rule with the vertical and horizontal lines, alignment of the handles. Maybe I'll go 45 degree to make it a little bit consistent. Let's see how this works. it looks a little better. Maybe dial back this handle so I can put the anchor point a little bit more to the side. Okay, see, now it's getting pointy. So as you'll see, you have to experiment a little bit with those points. It's not really easy, but once you get the hang of it, you can just adjust to your liking. I'm just gonna leave it like that. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. The last issue we have is this one right here, and this is pretty easy to fix. I'll just take the selection tool, select my shape, hit A, and as you'll see, we have two anchor points that form this curve. And obviously, if I want to change the weight, I can either use the inline, the inside of the letter to fix that, or the outside. Right now, the inside looks pretty looks fine, so I'll just click on this handle to see what's going on. And I should probably just drag this out a little to fix the weight. Not sure though. Yeah, it looks a lot better. Now we have a problem here, and we can fix that by using the inside to make it a little more consistent, maybe like that. This is again a little bit of playing around, looking what works. Sometimes you have the problem that these points have to be, like, one has to be higher than the other. Right now I think this one should go a little down. You can click with the anchor point selection tool and move them around with the arrow keys, or you can hold down Shift to go even bigger steps if you have to move them a little more around. Yeah, probably just leave it like that. Looks pretty good for me. Here's another weight issue. Maybe just address that. Pull this one out a little, and we're good to go. So this is how I just did the O. You can think of how I do all the other letters. There's a couple of more things that you can learn about Bezier curves, but this is the pretty basic stuff, and you should come a really far away with how these things work. If you have the problem that you have a corner point that you want to be sharp, not rounded, like I have everything in this lettering piece, you can just, again, with the selection tool, you can, with the direct selection tool, you can click those, go Shift C, and if you just click the handle here, you can just adjust this one, and this one stays the same. So you can pretty much go like this, and you'll have a sharp point like this. And with those tools, you can do pretty much anything you can imagine. If you have any questions about how to work with Bezier curves, you can always contact me and ask me questions. I'll try to answer them, and I hope you got a lot out of this tutorial. See you in the next video.